You know, usually when we talk about time, we think of it like a river. Like you're sitting in a little wooden boat and the current is just pulling you along inexorably.
Right, yeah.
And the past is the water behind you. Right, like it's gone forever. And the future is whatever is waiting around the next bend. We just accept it. We're flowing.
It feels inevitable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's comforting
Yeah.
in its linearity, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
We really like our narratives to have a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yeah.
The human brain is essentially, it's an engine designed to predict the next moment based on the previous one.
But then you encounter a story like the movie Arrival,
Right.
which is based on Ted Chiang's novella, by the way, and it serves as this great entry point for what we're looking at today. And suddenly that whole river metaphor just kind of evaporates.
Oh, absolutely. It completely dismantles it.
Because in the movie, humanity makes contact with these alien creatures, the heptapods, and the linguist trying to communicate with them discovers that they don't perceive time sequentially. They see it all at once. Like when they write, they don't produce words left to right or top to bottom.
Yeah.
They communicate using these incredibly complex circular symbols that they just spray out in a single timeless flash of ink.
Yeah, they are experiencing their entire timeline of existence, birth, life, and death, literally all simultaneously.
That's wow.
The brilliance of that narrative is how it just completely shatters our default human assumption of the structure of reality. It takes the concept of time and turns it from like a narrow hallway into this massive open architecture, a space you can view in its entirety.
And it forces you to ask a massive, slightly terrifying question, which is, what if that alien perspective is actually the mathematically accurate representation of our universe?
That is the question, yeah.
Like, what if our little boat on the river is just a biological hallucination? So welcome to this deep dive. Today we are taking on one of the most fundamental mysteries of existence, the true nature of time.
It's a big one.
It really is. And we have a huge stack of sources today that span centuries and disciplines to help you figure this out. We're looking at a fantastic piece from Nautilus on Einstein's block universe and, the physics of time.
Right. And we also have a really compelling essay from IAI News on a cutting-edge philosophical framework called fragmentalism.
Which is fascinating. And then we are pulling from a rigorous comparative scholarly study published in the Eastern Buddhist that examines two 13th century Japanese monks, Dōgen and Shinran.
And finally, we have original translations of Dogen's magnum opus, the Shubogenzo.
So our mission today is to bridge this seemingly impassable gulf between the cold mathematical reality of modern theoretical physics and the deeply personal, spiritual experience of the present moment.
We are going to trace a line from the equations of quantum gravity all the way to the silent meditation halls of Kamakura-era Japan.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if you're listening to this while you're prepping for a meeting or commuting or doing the dishes, prepare to look at your surroundings very differently by the time we finish.
Oh, definitely.
Because to understand time, we first have to look at what our best modern physics says about it. And honestly, it starts off looking pretty bleak. We have to talk about Einstein's block universe.
Right.
I think most of us vaguely know that Einstein proved time is relative, but the philosophical consequence of that relativity is what creates this block.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Let's trace the logic of how Einstein actually arrived there. Because before Einstein, we had Isaac Newton's view of time.
The ticking clock.
Exactly. Newton thought of time as basically a master clock ticking in the background of the universe. 1 second for me on Earth was exactly 1 second for a comet in deep space.
It was absolute.
Right, time was an absolute rigid stage on which the events of the universe played out. But Einstein completely dismantled that stage with the special theory of relativity.
Because he realized that the speed of light is the absolute speed limit of the universe, right?
Yes.
And because of that speed limit, space and time actually have to bend and warp to accommodate it.
The consequence of that bending is what we call the relativity of simultaneity. So, imagine you are standing on a train platform, and I am on a high-speed train zooming past you.
Okay, I'm on the platform.
Right. Now, if lightning strikes both ends of the platform at the exact same moment from your perspective, the light from both strikes reaches your eye simultaneously.
Because I'm standing still right in the middle.
Exactly. But because my train is moving toward one strike and away from the other, the light from the strike ahead of me reaches my eyes before the light from the strike behind me.
Oh, wow. Okay, so from your perspective on the moving train, the lightning strikes did not happen at the same time.
Exactly. One clearly happened before the other.
That is mind-bending.
And the wildest part of relativity is that neither of us is wrong. Your timeline on the platform is just as physically valid as my timeline on the train.
So wait, if now for me is different from now for you, then there cannot be a single universal that moves forward for everybody.
That's the ultimate conclusion, yeah. If my present can include what you consider to be your past or your future, just depending on how fast we are moving relative to each other.
Then the past and the future must already exist out there in the universe.
Yes. They have to be physically real, just waiting for a specific observer's frame of reference to intersect with them.
Which brings us to the block. If all pasts and all futures are actively existing, you can't have a flowing river. You have a solid object.
You have Minkowski spacetime. Hermann Minkowski, who was actually Einstein's former professor, he took Einstein's equations and realized they describe a static four-dimensional structure.
3 dimensions of space and 1 of time.
Exactly. Up, down, left, right, forward, back in time. It is a single frozen four-dimensional block.
I'm picturing this as like a giant, infinite block of clear ice. And trapped inside this ice is absolutely everything.
Everything. The Big Bang isn't an event that flared up and faded away in the past.
Yeah.
It is a permanent feature sitting at the far left edge of the block. The formation of the Earth, the Roman Empire, your birth, and, the eventual death of the sun billions of years from now, they're all permanently etched into the structure of this block.
So reality doesn't happen. It doesn't become. It simply is.
It just is. According to the Nautilus article by Joe Marchant, cosmologist Max Tegmark takes this to an even more granular, almost poetic level.
Oh, right, the braids.
Yeah, he describes us human beings as highly elaborate mathematical braids in space-time.
Braids. How does that work with motion, though, if I'm walking across the room?
Well, think about how motion works in the block universe.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is actually moving because time is just a coordinate like longitude or latitude on a map.
Okay.
If you take a single atom of carbon, it doesn't zip around. Instead, its entire history, from the beginning of the universe to the end, forms a continuous solid line, a thread basically embedded in the block.
So a human being is just a temporary clumping together of these threads.
Basically. At the moment of your conception, a few microscopic threads converge. And as you grow, more threads, atoms, from the food you eat, the water you drink, the air you breathe, they weave into this central structure, thickening it.
So I become this massive, complex trunk of trillions of atomic threads twisting through the ice.
Exactly. This trunk maps every physical location you've ever occupied.
But eventually, at the end of my life, at my death and decomposition, that thick braid splinters, right? It frays out as all those carbon and oxygen atoms disperse back into the soil and the air.
Yes. But the entire structure, from the thin frayed beginning to the thick twisting middle to the thin frayed end, it's just sitting there, completely static forever.
I'm just a 4-dimensional sculpture embedded in the glass.
You are. The source material uses the analogy of a DVD, which I think is super helpful to ground this.
Yeah, I love this analogy. If my life is a movie, the block universe isn't the image playing on the screen. It's the physical DVD disc itself.
Right. Consider the physical nature of a DVD. Just a piece of polycarbonate plastic with billions of microscopic pits burned into it.
So the data representing the opening scene is near the center of the disc.
And the data representing the finale is near the outer edge. But does the plastic physically change while you watch the movie?
No, not at all. The data is entirely static. The drama, the suspense, the forward motion of the plot that only exists in the playback.
Exactly. It only exists when the laser reads the data sequentially.
So in the block universe, time is just the mathematical label for where you are on the disk. The concept of a universal objective now is completely arbitrary.
There is no glowing spotlight moving across the universe illuminating the present moment.
Okay, but if I pause and look at my actual daily life, my human brain totally rebels against this.
Of course it does.
Because if I drop a glass of water on the kitchen floor, it shatters into 100 pieces, the water spills everywhere.
Right.
And I have never, ever seen a puddle of water spontaneously defy gravity, leap off the floor, and reassemble into a perfect glass in my hand.
No, you haven't.
We clearly have an arrow of time. We have a clear direction from order to disorder. If the block universe is a completely static sculpture, how do we explain this incredibly obvious flow?
Well, the explanation physics offers for the arrow of time requires us to separate fundamental reality from macro-level statistics.
Okay, lay that out for me.
Because if you look at the fundamental laws of physics, the equations governing how particles interact, they are completely time-symmetric. They do not care which direction time is flowing.
Wait, let's make sure we understand that, because it sounds counterintuitive. Are you saying that if I look at two atoms colliding, there's no past or future to that collision?
Essentially, yes. If you record a video of two isolated hydrogen atoms bouncing off each other in a vacuum, and you play that video backward, it looks exactly like a valid physical event.
It doesn't look weird or reversed.
Not at all. It obeys all the laws of momentum and energy conservation perfectly in reverse. There is no cause and effect at the deepest level of particle physics. They're just symmetrical patterns.
So if the fundamental building blocks of the universe are totally indifferent to the direction of time, where does the broken glass come from? Why does my coffee get cold?
It comes from entropy.
Ah, the second law of thermodynamics.
Exactly. Entropy is a measure of the number of ways a system can be arranged.
Mm-hmm.
We often translate this as a measure of disorder.
Right, things naturally get messier.
Right, but the universe moves from order to disorder for a purely statistical reason. There are vastly more ways for things to be disorganized than organized.
So it's literally just probability, like a messy bedroom.
Perfect analogy.
If my room is perfectly clean, with all the books alphabetized on the shelf and clothes folded in drawers, that is a state of extremely low entropy. It's highly ordered.
And how many specific arrangements of those items constitute that perfectly clean state?
Just one, essentially. Everything is in its exact designated place.
Right. And how many arrangements constitute a messy room?
Millions. Books on the floor, socks on the ceiling fan, shoes under the pillow.
Exactly. So statistically, as things move and interact, as you pull clothes out, read books, drop things, the room will naturally transition into one of the millions of messy states rather than returning to the single clean state.
Because the math just favors the mess.
Right. Not because a fundamental law of physics is pulling the room into the future, but simply because of probability. Heat spreads out, glass shatters, and bodies age because the universe is blindly mixing.
Oh, I see. We can't see the individual reversible collisions of a trillion water molecules. We only see the macro-level blur of all those molecules statistically moving from a rare, concentrated puddle in a glass to a probable dispersed puddle on the floor.
Yes. The arrow of time is a statistical illusion generated by our inability to perceive reality at the microscopic level.
A statistical illusion.
We are just riding a wave of probability that started with the Big Bang, which happened to be an unimaginably rare state of incredibly low entropy.
And the Nautilus article follows this mixing process to its ultimate conclusion, right? What physicists call the heat death of the universe.
Yes, because if everything is just constantly spreading out and mixing toward higher entropy, eventually the universe will hit maximum disorder.
Every star will exhaust its fuel and go dark. Galaxies will disperse.
Even black holes will eventually evaporate through Hawking radiation. You are left with a cosmos that is entirely homogeneous. The article vividly describes it as eternal peanut butter without any chunks.
Eternal peanut butter without chunks. Wow. Just a quiet, featureless bath of particles floating in an endless void, perfectly mixed.
Exactly. And when it hits that state of maximum entropy, nothing can change anymore. The water is totally flat, so the arrow of time just disappears.
Because there's no more mess to make.
Right. Time effectively ceases to exist because there's no longer a transition from lower to higher entropy to mark its passage.
I have to admit, standing back and looking at the block universe from this perspective is deeply unsettling.
It's very bleak.
Yeah. Because if the future is already fully carved into this giant four-dimensional glass brick, and the only reason we feel like things are happening is because we are helplessly sliding down a statistical slope from an improbable Big Bang to a vat of eternal peanut butter, it renders human agency totally irrelevant.
It really does.
I'm just an automaton experiencing the pre-written data on the DVD.
It is the ultimate determinism. Einstein actually found a strange comfort in it, though. When his lifelong friend Mikhail Besso died, Einstein wrote a letter to Besso's family saying that for a physicist, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion.
He believed his friend was still eternally alive at his specific coordinates in the space-time block.
Yes, but many modern physicists and philosophers find this view completely paralyzing.
And they are actively trying to escape the block. Because if physics tells us the now doesn't exist, it utterly fails to account for the single most undeniable empirical data point we have, our vivid, inescapable experience of the present moment.
Exactly. We don't just know the present conceptually. We feel the cut of the knife, we taste the hot coffee.
So we look to the theoretical rebels who are trying to rescue the flow of time.
And one of the most fascinating attempts comes from British theoretical physicist Julian Barbour.
I love his theories.
He looked at the foundational equations of quantum mechanics and general relativity, And he realized that you can actually rewrite them without using time as a fundamental variable at all.
No time variable at all.
None. He constructed a model of the cosmos made entirely of isolated, static configurations. He calls them nows.
Nows. I was captivated by the imagery he uses here. He asks us to imagine taking millions of individual photographs, like perfectly crystallized moments of reality, and tossing them into the air.
Right, and each photograph is a complete static arrangement of every particle in the universe relative to every other particle at one specific instant.
Yeah.
There is a photograph where you are taking a sip of coffee. There's another photograph where the coffee is slightly lower in the cup. But there is no invisible river of time connecting these photographs.
There is no underlying mechanism that transitions one into the next.
Exactly.
Wait, if there is no flow, how do I have a memory of taking the previous sip of coffee? If I am frozen in a single position. Now, how does the illusion of the past exist?
We have to analyze what a memory actually is. When you remember something, you are not literally time traveling to the past.
No, I'm just thinking about it.
Right. A memory is a physical configuration of neurons firing in your brain right now. The photograph, a fossil, a history book, these are all physical objects existing entirely in the present moment that contain encoded information about other states.
Oh, it's like a footprint in the sand. The footprint isn't the past. It's a depression in the sand that exists entirely in the present, but its shape implies a foot was there.
That's brilliant, yes. Barber calls these time capsules. You feel like time is flowing because your current static now contains all these time capsules, neural pathways, footprints, memories that your brain mathematically interprets as a sequence.
But the sequence is just an illusion constructed within a single eternal snapshot.
Exactly.
It's a breathtaking idea, but it still leaves us trapped in a frozen state.
True.
Let's move to Carlo Rovelli, because his approach to dismantling the block universe is entirely different.
Yes, Rovelli is a pioneer in loop quantum gravity.
Which is the attempt to reconcile Einstein's smooth, continuous space-time with the jagged, probabilistic world of quantum mechanics, right?
Exactly. Quantum gravity is the holy grail of modern physics because general relativity works perfectly for massive objects like stars and planets.
And quantum mechanics works perfectly for tiny objects like electrons and photons.
But if you try to use both at the same time, like inside a black hole, or the exact moment of the Big Bang, the math completely breaks down and gives you infinities. Rovelli is trying to find the underlying grammar of both.
And what he finds is that if you zoom in far enough down to the Planck scale, the smallest possible measurement of reality time just vanishes.
Completely. Rovelli proposes a purely relational universe. He argues that the world is not made of objects or substances, it is made of events.
Events?
Yeah, reality is an anarchic, fizzing cauldron of quantum interactions. Particles don't have intrinsic properties until they interact with another particle.
So a photon doesn't have a specific location until it hits my retina. The reality of the photon is the relationship between the photon and my eye.
Yes, and because reality is just this vast network of local interactions, there is no global order.
There's no master clock for the universe.
Exactly. And there is no static block. Time is entirely local.
This perfectly sets up the essay from IAI News by philosopher Samuele Quinto. He outlines a framework called fragmentalism, which takes this relational physics and builds a whole philosophy around it.
Fragmentalism argues that space-time is not a single, coherent whole. It is a patchwork of fundamentally incompatible perspectives.
And these are the fragments?
Right. And depending on which fragment you occupy, the universe looks entirely different. Two fragments will actively disagree on what events are past, present, and future.
When I was reading Quinto's essay, the best way I could visualize fragmentalism was by thinking about a cubist painting, like something by Picasso or Georges Braque.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Because in a traditional Renaissance painting, there is a single vanishing point. The geometry is perfectly ordered from one godlike perspective. That is the block universe.
A single coherent frame of reference, yes.
But a cubist painting fractures that. It shows you the front of a woman's face, her profile, and the back of her head all overlapping on the exact same canvas.
Right, the perspectives contradict each other. They are geometrically incompatible.
Yet they're all physically real and present on the canvas.
That captures the essence of fragmentalism perfectly. In this framework, the flow of time is real, but it is not universal. Time only flows relative to a specific observer. The fragments are not illusions hiding a deeper reality. The fragmented, subjective perspectives are the fundamental fabric of reality.
So time actually requires an observer to exist. The universe is a blank canvas until a perspective interacts with it.
Yes, and Ravelli expands on this by explaining exactly how our biological perspective generates the arrow of time. He uses the concept of blurring.
Blurring.
The only reason we experience entropy increasing, the only reason we see the coffee cooling and the glass breaking, is because our perception of the universe is severely limited.
Because we are blind to the underlying quantum reality. We don't see the individual billiard balls bouncing symmetrically.
Exactly. We only perceive macroscopic variables: temperature, pressure, volume. We take trillions of distinct quantum microstates and blur them together into a single macrostate.
The source material provides a brilliant analogy for this blurring effect using a deck of cards.
Right. Let's walk through the logic of that deck. Imagine a standard deck of 52 cards. Let's arrange them so they're perfectly sorted by suits.
Okay, all the hearts are together, then all the spades, then clubs, then diamonds.
Right. However, the numerical values within those suits are completely randomized. You might have the 3 of hearts, then the king of hearts, then the 7.
So it's ordered by suit, but chaotic by number.
Now imagine an alien observer who has a specific biological limitation. They can only perceive the numerical values of the cards. They are completely colorblind, and they can't see the shapes of the suits.
Okay.
When they look at this deck, what do they see?
Well, they see a totally random jumble. A 3, a king, a 7, an ace. It looks like maximum entropy, high disorder.
Right. If you take that deck and shuffle it, what changes for the alien observer?
Nothing. It was a random string of numbers before, and it's a random string of numbers now. From their perspective, there is no change in order, which means there is no arrow of time.
Exactly. Now imagine you step in. You are a human observer, and you care about the suits. You look at the unshuffled deck, and you see magnificent order. A solid block of red hearts, followed by black spades.
It is extremely low entropy.
And when you shuffle the deck, what happens?
That beautiful order is destroyed. The red and black cards mix together. The entropy of my system drastically increases.
Yes, the arrow of time emerges entirely from your specific, limited interaction with the deck.
But the cards themselves didn't change their fundamental nature.
Exactly. Rovelli suggests that the universe is already mixed up. It's already the smooth peanut butter. But we humans, because of our specific biological and neurological architecture, carve out a subset of variables that we consider ordered.
And as the universe naturally mixes, that specific subset breaks down, and we experience that breakdown as the unstoppable flow of time. Wait, if time is just a perspective, a blurring of reality based on our biological filters, does that mean the mind literally constructs time? Is time a psychological artifact rather than a physical dimension?
That is the profound, inescapable conclusion of these relational models. Time is not a physical substance out there in the void. Time is the relationship between the limited human mind and the infinite quantum universe.
If you're listening to this right now, just pause and take a breath. We have effectively dismantled physics and concluded that time is a subjective illusion generated by the observer.
It's a lot to take in.
But here is the most astonishing part of this entire deep dive, this realization. It isn't a product of 21st century supercomputers or particle accelerators. An ancient Japanese monk deduced this exact same framework over 800 years ago, relying on nothing but his own consciousness.
The parallels are staggering. We are leaving the theoretical physics departments of today and traveling back to 13th century Japan, to the Kamakura period. We're going to examine the philosophy of Dōgen.
Dōgen is a towering figure. He traveled to China, studied under a Zen master, and returned to Japan to found the Soto school of Zen.
And what is so compelling about Dōgen is that he tackled the exact same existential problem, the nature of time, the observer, and reality, but his laboratory was the meditation cushion.
He explored it through profound, intensive meditative practice, what they call zazen.
He synthesized his insights in a monumental work called the Shobogenzo, or Treasury of the True Dharma Eye. We are specifically focusing on a fascicle within that text called Uji.
Uji, which translates directly as being time.
The hyphen is critical. Dogen's central radical assertion in Uji is that being and time are not two separate things. Time is not an empty container that objects sit inside of. He writes, every existent thing is time.
The translation we have from the Matheson Trust uses incredibly vivid everyday imagery to ground this abstract concept. He says, the 16-foot golden Buddha is time, a monk's staff is time, a stone lantern is time. Taro and Jiro, which is the 13th century Japanese equivalent of saying Tom, Dick, and Harry are time. The earth and sky are time.
Let's examine how this maps onto the physics we just discussed. In our normal Newtonian perspective, we look at a towering pine tree and think of it as an object moving through time.
Right. The tree was a sapling in the past. It's a mature tree now, and it will be deadwood in the future.
But Dōgen completely rejects this. The pine tree is a specific instantiation of time. If you remove the concept of time, the pine tree ceases to exist. If you remove the pine tree, you erase that specific time.
He goes on to aggressively deconstruct the idea of transformation, the idea that one thing changes into another over time, and this is where his logic becomes incredibly sharp. He uses the example of firewood and ash.
This is perhaps his most famous and most challenging analogy. In our conventional view, fueled by the arrow of entropy, we think firewood burns and becomes ash. We see a clear, linear progression. Firewood is the past, the burning fire is the present, the ash is the future.
Just like Sean Carroll's egg becoming an omelet, it only goes one way.
But Dōgen dismantles this. He says, firewood becomes ash, and it does not become firewood again. Yet do not suppose that the ash is future and the firewood past.
If the ash isn't the future of the firewood, what is it? I mean, common sense says the wood burned.
Dōgen counters that by saying, you should understand that firewood abides in the phenomenal expression of firewood, which fully includes past and future, and is independent of past and future. Ash abides in the phenomenal expression of ash.
I really struggled with this initially. How can the firewood state be independent of the ash state?
Think back to the block universe, and specifically Julian Barber's Frozen Nows.
Oh, the time capsules.
Exactly. The event we call firewood has a specific set of coordinates in space-time. It is a complete, totalized state of being. The event we call ash has a completely different set of coordinates. It is its own complete, totalized state.
So the firewood isn't turning into the ash. They are two separate, fully complete phenomena that happen to sit next to each other on the DVD of reality.
Yes. The Buddhist term for this is a dharma situation, a specific, localized moment of phenomena. Dōgen argues that each dharma situation stands entirely on its own. It is absolute.
The firewood state lacks nothing. It is expressing the entirety of the universe as firewood.
And the ash state lacks nothing. It is expressing the entirety of the universe as ash. There is no flow connecting them.
He actually critiques our everyday linear view of time, calling it the unenlightened view. The text has this beautiful metaphor where he says the unenlightened person thinks time is like traveling. You hike over a tall mountain, you wade across a wide river, and you leave them behind you in the past. And now you reside in a fine vermilion palace in the present.
That perfectly encapsulates the boat on a river metaphor. The mountain and the river are gone. They are the past.
But Dōgen says this is a delusion. He states, the time has to be in me. Inasmuch as I am there, it cannot be that time passes away.
The time has to be in me. That is Carlo Rovelli's relational physics articulated 8 centuries early. That is fragmentalism.
Wow.
Dōgen is arguing that when you climb the mountain, you are a complete dharma situation. That moment of mountain climbing time is absolute and eternal. It doesn't dissolve into nothingness just because your consciousness is currently inhabiting palace-residing time.
They are both eternal presence, he writes. 3 heads and 8 elbows. A reference to a fearsome guardian deity is yesterday's time. A height of 16 feet is today's. But yesterday or today means the time when one goes straight into the mountains. It has never passed. It seems to be of the past, but it is of the present.
The synthesis here is profound. Dōgen agrees with the block universe that time doesn't pass away, but he rescues us from the cold determinism of the block by infusing it with the deep, subjective reality of relational time.
The entire universe, the whole expanse of space and history, is crystallized into the unique singularity of the observer's present moment.
Exactly. A single blade of grass right now contains the entire Earth.
Which is poetically stunning, but I find myself hitting a wall when it comes to application.
How so?
Well, how does a person actually live like this? Let's say I'm paralyzed with anxiety about a massive presentation I have to give tomorrow. My job is on the line. If I am time, and every moment is a complete, absolute dharma situation, how do I experience that? Because sitting at my desk, I don't feel like an eternal, absolute being time. I feel like a biological machine being dragged toward a terrifying future. How do I actually experience this suchness Dōgen writes about?
For Dōgen, you cannot think your way into this realization.
Yeah.
You cannot philosophize your way out of the illusion of time. You have to physically enact it. His answer is Zazen, seated meditation.
Just sitting?
Just sitting. And the crucial distinction in Soto Zen is that practice and realization are identically one.
Wait, so you don't meditate in order to become enlightened in the future?
No, because if you meditate to get something in the future, you are reinforcing the illusion of linear time. You're reinforcing the arrow of entropy. Dōgen teaches that the very physical act of sitting in correct posture, of casting off body and mind, is the realization of your inherent Buddha nature in the absolute present.
He writes, to learn the Buddhist way is to learn about oneself. To learn about oneself is to forget oneself. To forget oneself is to perceive oneself as all things. You have to completely dissolve the ego, the calculated mind that is projecting the presentation tomorrow.
Let's link that back to the physics of perception. The calculating anxious mind is the exact biological filter that creates Ravelli's blurring. The ego is the mechanism that sorts the cards into suits and creates the arrow of time.
Oh.
So by dropping the self through intense meditative focus, you remove the filter, you stop blurring the universe, you perceive reality in its uncompressed, unfragmented state. A series of complete, perfect, eternal moments.
Firewood is firewood, stress is stress, sitting is sitting.
Exactly.
But what if I just can't? What if I sit on the cushion and instead of perceiving myself as all things, I just think about my grocery list and my knee hurts and I'm angry at my boss?
Right, the monkey mind.
Yeah. What if my ego is too thick and I feel too deeply flawed to ever cast off my mind?
It's the most human dilemma possible. The sheer rigorousness of Dogen's method can be deeply alienating for someone overwhelmed by their own neuroses. But historically, right alongside Dōgen, there was another monk navigating this exact same despair, Shinran.
Shinran is the founder of Jodo Shinshu, or True Pure Land Buddhism, and his philosophy is the necessary counterweight in our exploration today. Because if Dōgen is the strict, highly disciplined master who says, drop your ego and merge with time, Shinran is the compassionate figure who acknowledges that for most of us, dropping the ego feels physically impossible.
Shinran's theology is built on a radically different view of human nature. While Dōgen believed all beings are inherently enlightened and simply need to actualize it, Shinran viewed the human self as fundamentally, irrevocably corrupt.
The contextual backdrop for this is crucial. The comparative study by Trent Collier in the Eastern Buddhist explains that Shinran believed he was living in the age of Mapo.
Mapo translates to the last Dharma age. In Buddhist cosmology, it was believed that thousands of years after the historical Buddha passed away, the world would enter an era of profound spiritual decline.
Okay.
The teachings would remain, but human beings would become so deeply entrenched in greed, ignorance, and conflict that achieving enlightenment through traditional, rigorous practices like Dōgen Zazen would become impossible.
Shinran was consumed by an awareness of what he called blind passions: hatred, greed, desire, jealousy. He has this heartbreakingly honest quote: I know truly how grievous it is that I, Gutoku Shinran, am sinking in an immense ocean of desires and attachments and am lost in vast mountains of fame and advantage.
It is such a modern sentiment.
It really is. It's the feeling of lying awake at 3 a.m., scrolling on your phone, acutely aware of your own hypocrisy and flaws.
Because the self is poisoned by these blind passions, Shinran concluded that any attempt to achieve enlightenment through your own effort is inherently flawed. He called this self-power.
Self-power.
Right. If you sit on a cushion doing Zazen, but your underlying motivation is a selfish desire to achieve peace or become spiritually superior, your ego is still running the show.
It's a paradox. The harder you try to destroy your ego, the stronger your ego gets because you are the one trying to win at meditation. It's like trying to wash off mud using muddy water.
Precisely the dilemma. So Shinran concluded that if self-power is completely ineffective in the age of Mapo, the only path to liberation is total reliance on other power.
And in the Pure Land tradition, other power refers to the vow of Amida Buddha.
Amida is a transcendent, celestial Buddha. According to the sutras eons ago, Amida made a primal vow out of infinite compassion. He promised to establish a pure land, a realm free from suffering, where enlightenment is guaranteed, and vowed that any being who truly entrusted themselves to him and recited his name would be born there.
The physical practice for this is the Nembutsu, reciting the phrase Namu Amida Butsu, which means I take refuge in Amida Buddha. But Shinran revolutionized how this recitation functioned. It wasn't a transaction, right? You weren't earning points.
Traditional Pure Land followers often view the Nembutsu transactionally.
Yeah.
Like, if I say the name 10,000 times, I will earn my ticket to the Pure Land.
Right, which is just calculation again.
Exactly. Shinran recognized that this was still calculation. It was still self-power disguised as devotion. Shinran argued that the Nembutsu should never be used as a tool to gain something in the future. Instead, it should be a spontaneous, involuntary expression of profound gratitude that arises only when you achieve Shinjin.
Shinjin. True and trusting. The exact moment a person completely abandons their ego-driven efforts, admits total defeat, and surrenders entirely to the compassion of Amida.
And this is the hinge point where Shinran's theology spectacularly collides with the theoretical physics of time we discussed earlier, because Shinran explicitly describes this moment of total surrender, this Shinjin, as Ichin.
The one thought moment.
In the absolute present of this one thought moment, the normal linear progression of time, the arrow of entropy, completely shatters.
How does a 13th century monk's religious conversion map onto quantum space-time?
To understand this, we have to look at the analysis provided by 20th century Japanese philosopher Keiji Nishitani. He unpacked a specific passage where Shinran reflects on the temporality of Amida's vow, and Nishitani reveals that three distinct dimensions of time simultaneously collapse in the Ishinen.
Let's trace these three times. First, you have the unfathomably distant past. The mythology states that Amida Buddha made his compassionate vow 10 kalpas ago. A kalpa is a cosmological unit of time, essentially an eternity. So we are talking about the deepest primordial past.
That's time one. Time two is the literal present moment, the exact millisecond that a corrupt, flawed human being like Shinran in Kamakura, Japan, or someone listening today, realizes Shinjin and utters the Nimbutsu.
And time three is the future, the eventual attainment of Buddhahood in the Pure Land, which is promised to occur after the physical death of the practicer.
Right. In our everyday river-flowing experience of time, these three events are separated by vast gulfs, past, present, future. But Shinran claims that in the Ishinen, in the one thought moment of absolute surrender, these three times are experienced entirely simultaneously.
Wow.
Nishitani's philosophical analysis of this is brilliant. He argues that in the moment of Shinjin, the practicer is fundamentally extracted from world history. They are pulled out of the linear progression of cause and effect, out of the biological blurring that creates entropy. Nishitani writes that in this eternal person in the universe, now the practicer stands as the only person alone in the universe.
That imagery is astounding, as the only person alone in the universe. It implies that by giving up the calculating ego, you literally step outside the block universe for a fraction of a second. You aren't just a blind observer riding a localized fragment of time. You are suddenly merged with the entire architecture of the cosmos.
It is a radical transcendence. The calculating mind, the ego, is the engine that sustains the illusion of a threatening future and a regretful past. When that engine shuts down in total surrender, you experience the absolute present. And because you are connected to the eternal vow of Amida, the distant past and the promised future are already fulfilled in this exact moment.
But what happens to the person afterward? Does achieving this transcendent Ishin suddenly make you a perfect, flawless human? Do the blind passions disappear?
This is where Shinran is profoundly psychologically realistic and deeply compassionate. No, the blind passions do not vanish. You still get angry in traffic. You still experience greed. You remain a flawed biological creature.
He uses the imagery of clouds and sunlight, which is incredibly comforting. He compares our blind passions, our anxiety, our selfishness to thick, heavy storm clouds. But Amida's compassion is the brilliant sunlight. When you achieve Shinjin, the clouds of your neuroses don't magically dissipate. You don't become a cloudless sky, but the sunlight shines behind and through the clouds, illuminating them.
He also uses a profound metaphor involving water. He says that evil karma, our accumulated psychological baggage, isn't erased or nullified. Instead, it is transformed through context. He writes, just as all waters, upon entering the great ocean, immediately become ocean water.
The toxic river of your daily anxiety and fear flows into the vast, infinite ocean of cosmic compassion. The water molecules don't change, but they cease to be toxic river water. They simply become the ocean. You remain your flawed self, but your relationship to reality is entirely transfigured.
We have traversed an immense landscape of thought today. We've looked at Einstein's block universe, a static four-dimensional crystal where the past, present, and future all coexist simultaneously. We've explored Julian Barber's isolated nows and Carlo Rovelli's relational quantum mechanics, revealing that the arrow of time is a statistical illusion created by our biological limitations.
We dove into the 13th century, examining Dōgen's Uji, which taught us that being and time are identical, and that the firewood and the ash are complete, absolute dharma situations. And we just navigated Shinran's Ishinin, where the total surrender of the ego collapses all of history into a single, eternal thought moment.
When we lay these scientific and spiritual frameworks over one another, the undeniable parallel emerges. Whether you are Max Tegmark observing mathematical braids in space-time, or Dōgen seeing the entire universe contained within a single pine tree, or Shinran experiencing the fulfillment of eternity in a single, uncalculated utterance, the conclusion is identical. Our everyday linear perception of time is a localized illusion.
Is a pragmatic illusion. We need the arrow of entropy to know when to pull a cake out of the oven or to remember to pay rent. But it is not the fundamental bedrock of reality.
And on the spiritual axis, both Dōgen and Shinran demand the exact same mechanism to pierce that illusion. Despite their diametrically opposed views of human nature, inherent purity versus fundamental corruption, they both recognize that the calculating, striving, ego-driven self is the architect of our temporal suffering.
Dōgen demands you passed off body and mind. Shinran demands you abandon self-power.
Shinran formalized this state of non-calculation with the term jinen honi. It refers to the spontaneous, natural unfolding of reality, completely free of human contrivance. It is reality functioning exactly as it is, without our desperate attempts to force it into a linear narrative of progress or decline.
So if you are listening to this right now, feeling crushed by the weight of a deadline, or paralyzed by regret over a past mistake, or just generally overwhelmed by the sheer velocity of modern life, recognize that your suffering is largely generated by the illusion of the timeline. You are exhausted because you believe you are a passenger in a boat hurtling toward a waterfall, but physics and philosophy agree. You do not exist in time. You are time.
The spiritual awakening of the Zen masters and the equations of quantum gravity are pointing toward the exact same foundational truth. Reality is dynamic, relational, and requires our participation. Realization isn't an object you acquire. It's not a destination you travel toward in the future. It is the fundamental state of reality that you can participate in right now.
The firewood is perfect, whole firewood. The ash is perfect, whole ash. The moment you are inhabiting right now, listening to these ideas unfold, is a complete and absolute Dharma situation.
Which leaves us with a truly provocative final thought. We've seen how physics suggests that the flow of time is a byproduct of human perception, a biological blurring of quantum reality. We only see the macro-level mess of entropy, not the microscopic symmetry.
Our limited neurological perspective literally constructs the arrow of time.
And we've seen how Dōgen and Shinran demonstrate that by transcending the ego, by shutting down the calculating mind, a human being fundamentally alters their experience of time, stepping out of linearity and into an eternal present.
Wait. If our biological ego creates the physical illusion of time, and these monks figured out how to completely deactivate that ego, does that mean spiritual enlightenment is actually a physical phase transition of consciousness?
When Dōgen cast off his mind in deep zazen, or when Shinran surrendered entirely to other power in the one thought moment of Isshinan, did they literally remove the biological blurring that Ravelli describes in his physics? Did they alter the quantum perspective of their own consciousness to see the universe as it mathematically truly is, a timeless, simultaneous whole?
Did they achieve the perspective of the heptapods from Arrival, able to look at reality not as a relentless sequence of causes and effects, but as a single, static, infinitely complex ink stain of existence, perfectly complete all at once? It completely reframes how you look at a falling leaf, or a broken glass, or the person sitting across from you.
It fundamentally changes what it means to be alive in the present moment.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the nature of time and reality. We hope this exploration has given you a profound new lens through which to view your day. And remember, wherever you are and whenever you are, the present moment lacks nothing. It is entirely complete within itself.